T and XP acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to T and XP, a couple's cozy gaming podcast.
We're feeling cozy, and we hope you are too.
I'm Alexander.
And I'm Erin.
T and XP is like a book club for cozy video games. And today, we're going on a cozy trip to the French countryside with Dordogne.
Dordogne is a 2023 game developed by Un Je ne sais quoi and Humanimation, clearly French studios. It can be played on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series XS, Nintendo Switch, and Microsoft Windows. We played on Steam. Dordogne is a seemingly simple but delightfully complex game. You play as Mimi in the early 2000s and also the 80s. Adult Mimi has discovered her estranged grandmother Nora has passed away and left her a letter saying something is left for her at the family house in Dordogne. Adult Mimi's difficulties are twofold. Firstly, her father doesn't want her to go to the house and, via annoying text messages, attempts to dissuade you. Secondly, Mimi can't remember anything before her 13th birthday. She can't remember her grandparents or why her father disconnected from them. Once at the house, you swap between adult Mimi getting into the house and feeding a local stray cat, and 12-year-old Mimi spending a summer at Nora's house. Her grandfather has passed away, but there are memories in the form of letters and cassettes left for you to uncover. 12-year-old Mimi navigates daily life with Nora. They go to the markets and complete simple shopping tasks, tend to the vegetable garden, and fix up the kayak so you can paddle up the river. During these errands, Mimi encounters and later befriends a young thief from the markets named Renaud. He shares the legend of a sleeping dragon and its treasure in the Dordogne River and vows he will find it. You follow their adventures throughout the rest of the summer, which culminates in the events that caused Mimi's memory loss and estrangement from her grandmother. Adult Mimi at the empty house remembers this, and there is a happy ending for her and a friendly reunion.
This is a point-and-click game, with Mimi encouraged to photograph, record audio, and find stickers to capture memories. You click around to explore your surroundings, either in search of helpful items or to simply get Mimi's thoughts on things. As adult Mimi, you'll explore the empty house in search of items to prompt her missing memories, and reply or not to the barrage of people texting you. Sometimes you'll uncover old letters to shine a light on the past, but other critical objects will trigger flashbacks, unlocking memories, or more mechanically, the next game chapter for Mimi. During flashbacks, you'll then play as young Mimi, as she helps her grandma, runs around the countryside, and collects stickers, photos, and audio recordings to document her summer in Dordogne. Items you can interact with often have a gentle shine, or there'll be a trail of footprints to indicate that you can transition to a new area. Animated question marks or exclamation marks, along with some verbal guidance from Grandma Nora, also help guide the way. Several options present themselves, not as typical pop-up dialogue options, but as emotions and feelings superimposed over the artwork. An early example of this is young Mimi at the breakfast table. Instead of simply choosing food, sad, lonely Mimi will choose an emotion to express herself to her grandmother. The words you choose to click on form a word bank which you can then use to create poetry at the end of each day and can be added alongside your stickers, photographs, and audio clips to form a scrapbook. Dordogne isn't really a puzzle-style point-and-click game, but more like a visual novel which you simply click through. It'll have you complete simple activities, explore small areas, and navigate your present to rediscover your past.
Yeah. So there are a few key characters in the game. The obvious one is Mimi. Adult Mimi has lost her job. She's seeing a therapist and she ends up sleeping in her car, although we figured out that maybe it was just on the way to grandmother's house, that she doesn't live in her car.
Yeah, we think that was just depicting, the long trip to the French countryside to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. She's pretty curious and driven and independent, and her dad is trying to stop her from going to her grandmother's house as well. And I actually feel like you get to know young Mimi, though, more than adult Mimi. Adult Mimi is us, basically, trying to recover memories and navigate the space that we don't know about, whereas young Mimi is more confident and she has more opinions, and we get to know her a lot more through gameplay.
Yeah, I think adult Mimi is almost more like a narrator or almost like a game mechanic. That she tends to appear in the interludes between chapters and will just give you, the player, a bit of perspective as to how you're going to unlock the next memory, because, of course, she doesn't necessarily know any more than you do at that point.
Exactly. Another key character in here is Nora. We see Nora only in the flashback sequences. In the early 2000s, she's the character who's just passed away and is the catalyst for Mimi going out to the house in the countryside. She's a pretty no-nonsense character, but she is passionate and she is really determined to look after Mimi on that holiday and just make sure that she hopefully has a good time. In the flashback sequence, Nora has lost Edouard, her husband, and so there is a little bit of grief in there as well. Nora doesn't let Mimi go into Edouard's hobby room, but is actually really kind about it when Mimi does eventually find her way in. She is a kind and stubborn character, and she is interesting in the way that she has opinions about Renaud, a character we're going to talk about in a moment, and also her son Fabrice as well. She often butts heads with him via correspondence and phone calls and things like that. They don't get on very well at all.
Yeah, and you gather that they never had, that it was even kind of before the events in the flashback.
Yes.
That maybe they always had a slightly distant relationship or something.
Yeah. It's actually mentioned by the next character, which is Edouard, who has, like we said, passed away already in the flashback sequences, but we get to know him through cassettes and letters, and he actually states that in one of the cassettes to Nora, is that idea that by helping to shape and create this person who's strong-willed and like themselves, that there is inevitably the possibility that they might not get on.
I think although he doesn't get a huge amount of content, it's usually just him being referred to or a few audio recordings. Edward's quite a nice character. Even just when he's setting up his hobby room, he's equally enthusiastic, but he's also a bit embarrassed about it because he feels it's almost slightly childish to have this hobby.
Yes, absolutely. And I really like the way that it comes across as potentially busybody-ish, but the way that he advocates for young Renaud as well is really charming.
Yeah, he's someone who, is trying to right or wrong he sees in the world, and he's trying to look after people in his own way.
Yeah, it's nice. Which brings us to Renaud.
Yeah.
We meet him at the market, and he is stealing stuff, which is why Nora thinks that he is a thief.
In fairness, there's some grounding to that.
Yeah, there's evidence for her opinion that he's a thief because he thieved. Later on, we are properly introduced to him during the kayaking trip, and Mimi and Renaud become fast friends. And Renaud also tells Mimi of his theory of the dragon treasure that will exist like in the river and under the mountain that they then work together to try and retrieve.
Yes, and this legendary adventure to defeat the dragon and find the treasure is really their kind of main motivation for the summer and what really draws them together as new friends.
Yeah.
Before you go any further, I just want to make a few comments on the artwork, which is one of the huge appeals of this game. The artwork is key to why Dordogne is so special. Even though this isn't a game about art, it seems fitting that the story set in the French countryside should have such lovely watercolours. The art strikes a nice balance between light touches and gorgeous detail. In the house, you can read the titles and magazines and see these little details, and in the French countryside segments, it's really one of those stop and stare games, where you want to have a good look at some of the scenery and vignettes. I think the photography element of the game also really helps you appreciate this too, and just gives you a moment to stop and appreciate it. It complements just with a simple, appropriate soundtrack that goes with it, and it's got some very solid voice acting.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Even if you don't intend on playing this game, I highly recommend going to the game's website, or even just Google images to see the lovely hand-painted artistry.
Yeah, it really is a beautiful feature of the game, and one of the reasons why in a wish list or while you're searching online, you will notice this game.
Yeah, it's something which really sets it apart from other cozy games.
Yeah. So, onto accessibility. We played Dordogne using a controller, and generally we found it easy to use. Options to interact with game objects pop up very clearly. Important items needed to progress a scene will shimmer to get your attention, and even the hidden collectibles only require you to walk nearby, upon which a clear icon will pop up. You might not find everything, we didn't, but it will be because you didn't explore everywhere, not because of camouflage graphics that you didn't spot. You don't need to control the camera, but you will occasionally need to use both hands at once, either to use both direction sticks at the same time or to hold a button while moving a stick. That said, you won't need any quick reactions or careful timing. There are a few light mini-games, but you can't really fail in these. On balance, we found some of the controls a little bit clunky, but that was just because point and click can be, not because it was poorly done.
I think the only time where it was maybe a little egregious was just for some of these mini-games, But again, these are just harmless ones designed there just for you to take your time and immerse yourself a bit.
Yeah.
I think there were usually things like cooking a meal or making a cup of tea or even pouring a bowl of cereal.
Yeah.
The worst that will happen is it'll look slightly silly and slightly comedic as you throw cereal up and down the kitchen, but there's no in-game consequences for this. It just might mean that, your spouse will laugh at you if she's watching you play the game.
Just like in real life when we throw cereal everywhere. Tell us a bit about what some of the big ideas in Dordogne are.
Okay, so as you probably gathered from the amnesia and flashbacks, memory and forgetting are going to be what really drive the narrative of the game.
Yeah, for sure.
That said, what I actually would love to talk about is just how it depicts childhood and nostalgia.
It was very clever.
It really struck a chord with me just how Mimi interacts with her grandmother and, being sent away to stay with her grandmother over the holidays.
Yeah.
I think it was very genuine because it starts with homesickness. And, she's missing her friends and she's missing Paris. And she's like, what am I supposed to do in this old house with my grandparents? Like, none of the stuff here is for me. I don't understand any of this food.
Yeah, and I think that both of us can relate to the idea of like time spent with grandparents and things like that. That idea of it's not always immediately where you want to be, but you end up having a good time as well. And it really ties in well with that gameplay mechanic of the superimposed word choices over the top of items. So
Yeah.
you're choosing those words that then reflect how she's feeling in those moments, because a lot of them do relate to interactions with Nora and how she's feeling about her grandmother at that point in time.
And I just love the early example of that when you're sitting down for breakfast and you think you're picking what you're having, but then when you kind of cursor over each object, it actually has an emotion.
Yes.
And so you're saying, are you feeling frightened? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling whatever else?
Yeah, that's a really nice way to do it as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the other big ideas in this is the complexity of family as well. So we never meet Mimi's dad, Fabrice, but we do realise that he's fairly argumentative. He's very protective of Mimi, both young Mimi, but also of older adult Mimi as well. And we both kind of landed on the idea that he's possibly not a very nice person, but we do actually, by the end of the game, understand his reaction after that summer about why he didn't let Mimi see Nora ever again.
Yeah, so even though you don't meet him, it's quite clear that he's antagonistic, just based on the barrage of text messages he sends to Mimi trying to discourage her from going to the house and then staying at the house and basically doing anything other than just going straight home to Paris. But equally, the more you play the game, the more you realise that maybe he just had this really complex relationship with the grandmother.
Yes, yeah.
You don't actually get a huge amount of detail based on what the grandma was like as a mother. And I think even that, it's one of those complexities of family that sometimes people can be pretty average parents, but they mellow out and become really lovely grandparents.
Yes.
And that's almost what's happening in this game.
Yeah. And I said that's a complex set of feelings for Fabrice to deal with as well.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, Mimi's there kind of caught in the crossfire.
Yeah. As I said, you've got adult Mimi navigating both the present via her phone and the past via these old letters that shine a new light on her flashback sequences. Tell me a bit about why this game is cozy.
It's a game that really encourages you to take your time. So, for example, there's a scene where you're choosing your tea and then going through the ritual of picking a mug, boiling the kettle, and so on. You don't win or lose these little segments, you just enjoy them.
Very true.
In terms of coziness, this is probably saying more about my state of mind, but the game foreshadows that Mimi had a traumatic amnesia-inducing event, and it kind of stressed me out waiting to see what it was.
Same. Yep.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Now, I was really worried the game was going to take this weird dark turn at the 11th hour, but as a very modest spoiler, it turns out that it wasn't anything at all that sinister. It's still physically traumatic, but the game doesn't take this weird turn into sinister territory.
Yes, we were sort of waiting for child-based crime to be happening, and that doesn't eventuate. It just happens, it's traumatic, but it's not the end of the world. There is also some peril alluded to. You can't really fail at the game, but you're still watching a 12-year-old scale a cliff without any adult supervision. I get that it's about a simpler time when kids were more independent, but do stop jumping on ledges and literal cliffs. That was worrying me.
It worried me too. Like, sure, let them go play in ditches and stuff, but when she's climbing up these crumbling ruins on a literal cliffside, and then it gives way and she does dust herself off and goes even higher up this crumbling cliff. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, kids are just made of rubber, don't you know?
Mimi certainly is, which is probably for the best.
Yes, yeah. And despite the peril, the artwork and the gameplay and the combination of the two through the scrapbooking feature really heightens and contributes to the cozy feeling of the game.
Okay, one thing we should talk a bit more about is the scrapbooking, because I thought it was just this great little feature in the game.
Yeah, definitely.
So, at the end of each flashback segment, as young Mimi, you'll sit down with your scrapbook, and you will choose, I think it's a photo, a sound recording if you have one, a sticker you've discovered, and you'll also write a little bit of poetry. And the way they do that is it'll gather up the emotions you've uncovered during the day, and then you can string those together, and each one will have a few options, and you'll make a little poem.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
Yeah, and again, it's just this nice take your time sort of element of the game where it encourages you just to relax and just have this silly, non-consequential thing where you can still just have the satisfaction of making this little scrapbook.
Yeah, it's very rewarding.
Yeah. This also ties in with the key idea of memory and forgetting. All the events in the game are fixed and there's only one way they can really play out. But by selecting Mimi's memories and then scrapbooking, you can decide how Mimi actually feels about these events, and I thought that was a really interesting take on it. That, the event will happen, you just have to play through that, you don't get to change the outcome, but you can decide whether it was a happy or a sad event. You can say that the main focus of the day was about discovering something new or reconnecting with the grandma. I really love this subjectivity and this kind of player agency for interpretation.
Yeah. It is a beautiful and skillful convergence of artwork and gameplay and ideas, and why I would give Dordogne 5 out of 5 on the Cosy scale. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with a 5 out of 5 rating. This maybe comes with the small asterisk that, I think it's a 5 out of 5 now that I know the amnesia-inducing event isn't going to be taking a sinister turn.
Yeah.
I have been burned by other games that decide they're going to have a bit of a genre twist towards the end, but Dordogne just stays relaxing and cozy throughout.
Nice. Well, what do you think of the game overall?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it had some very sincere character development, especially with how they depict young Mimi. How she starts off being very reluctant and almost a little bit resentful at being banished away to the French countryside where she has nothing to do. Yep. But that's almost it. That you then play again, I think, 1 week in, and she's settled into a routine, and she's enjoying it, and she's starting to help her grandmother go to the market and help in the veggie garden.
Yeah.
And then, week 2, she's made a new friend with Reno, and starting to explore the countryside, and is kayaking up and down, and having these really independent adventures, and then catching up with him. And yeah, just ends up having an absolute blast and just having this amazing time in the French countryside.
Yeah.
It's a very cozy experience. It's great fun to tag along with. And I think it's part of what makes this such a cozy game. It also had a lot of attention to detail on this game. So one example is just looking at the photos on the wall. They're going to be the same photos in the same spot. You'll walk past them a dozen times. But every time you revisit them in a different chapter, the characters will have something different to say about it. So first time when young Mimi sees them, and she's maybe not in a great frame of mind, she'll just say, oh, these are just boring old photos. I don't know who anyone is in there. And then as the game goes on, she'll develop this curiosity and appreciation of just finding out who these relatives were and seeing these familiar figures either back when they were alive or back when they were much younger.
Yeah. Look, for me, the thing that I loved about the game was the artwork, particularly in the scenery in the French countryside. I thought it was so lovely. I really also loved the scrapbooking part of the game as well. I thought it really drew together a number of game mechanics really well. The idea of the word collecting, being able to take photos, being able to record sound bites as well. And I just think all of these wrapped together really well to make that a really important feature of the game that complemented a summer in the countryside for a young person really well.
And look, this isn't the first cozy game to have, escape to the country as one of its main themes. This is...
Or some kind of scrapbook record either, yeah.
This is true, but it still does a really good job of it, and it's got its own spin on these things.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, just before I put you out of your misery and get to the actual game rating, is that this might be a bit of a controversial call, but I think it's easier to give a higher rating on short games, especially cozy ones, because a short game, it can be tight and packaged and much more curated than this open-ended sandbox game that needs to go for 100 hours. In particular, a slower-paced narrative, like the one in Dordogne, kind of suits a short gameplay, because you might not keep playing a slow-paced game for, dozens and dozens of hours. But in Dordogne, the pace and game length kind of complement each other quite well.
Yeah.
It knows when to linger and when to let you take your time, and when to just fast forward a week.
Yeah. Overall, we would rate Dordogne 4 out of 5, and we would give it a B on the SABDC scale.
I agree. So the main reason I don't want to give this a 5 out of 5 is just because sometimes the controls can be a little clunky, and hey, that might have just been our preference to use a controller rather than a mouse and keyboard. but also, at times the game's not sure whether it wants to be a puzzle game or a visual novel game. Maybe this makes the gameplay a little bit superficial as it tries to have a foot in both camps.
Yeah, but regardless, a beautiful and lovely game that we really enjoyed.
That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to T and XP, a couple's cozy gaming podcast. We'd like to encourage you to follow our Instagram account, which you can find at T and XP Podcast. And if you like listening to us, then rating, reviewing, and following are really helpful in ensuring like-minded people find us. Join us next week for our final episode before the Christmas break, where we will look at Wonder Stop, where tea is literally part of the experience. Stay cozy.
Like a wonder in the French countryside.